The Wolf King's dead spirit rose from its grave, the moment the rejected Luna walked past it. One heartbeat earlier, all of Veyrhold had been laughing at her. Isla Vale stood barefoot on the frozen tomb road with the royal funeral torch shaking in both hands, its blue flame lighting every cruel face in the crowd. Snow fell over the black stone path. Temple bells tolled above the royal burial grove. Hundreds of nobles, guards, widows, priests, and wolf-blooded lords had gathered beneath the winter moon to watch the woman they called a failed Luna carry the final flame for the wolf she was accused of killing. They had not given her the torch to honor the dead. They had given it to her so the entire kingdom could watch her shame burn. "Walk!" High Priestess Selvera Thorn commanded. Isla walked. The torch flame leaned toward her chest as if it smelled the scar beneath her mourning dress. She nearly stopped. No one else saw it. No one else heard the sound that followed. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Claws under stone. Isla's fingers tightened around the iron torch handle until the cold bit into her skin. For 3 months, they had told her the scratching was madness. Grief. Guilt. A rejected mate's broken mind trying to invent proof that she had not destroyed the king's wolf during the bonding rite. But tonight, on the funeral road, the dead wolf scratched again. And the flame heard it. The crowd whispered as she passed. Wolf killer. Rejected thing. He should have buried her with the beast. Isla kept her eyes forward. Her dark hair blew loose around her face. Her torn black mourning dress dragged over the snow. The Luna bracelets had been stripped from her wrists after the rejection, leaving pale circles where silver had once marked her as chosen. Beneath her collarbone, the old mate mark had faded into a ghostly scar. No longer whole, not fully dead. At the top of the funeral steps stood Wolf King Rhaedan Veyr. He looked like a king carved from winter and rage. Black armor, silver crown, dark hair wind-torn beneath the moon. A fur cloak fastened at his throat with the royal wolf sigil. His face was beautiful in the cruel way of a blade, all sharp lines and sleepless shadows. He did not move when Isla looked at him. 3 months ago, he had rejected her before this same court. 3 months ago, his wolf spirit had screamed under the bonding moon and collapsed behind him. Enormous silver-black body convulsing as black chains burst from the altar. Rhaedan had fallen to his knees, blood on his mouth, while Isla reached for him with both hands and begged him to breathe. High Priestess Selvera had shouted first. "She poisoned the bond!" The court believed her because it was easier than questioning a temple. By dawn, Isla was stripped of the Luna veil. By noon, Rhaedan rejected her with a voice colder than death. By nightfall, the priest declared his wolf spirit gone. Dead. Buried. Tonight, the kingdom gathered to mourn that wolf, and to punish her for surviving it. Selvera stood beside the king in white temple robes, her silver hair braided beneath a crown of black moonbone. Near her stood Lady Neressa, the replacement queen the court already preferred. Pale, graceful, perfectly noble, with a white wolf, shadow sitting obediently behind her, like a jewel trained to breathe. Selvera lifted her hand. "Let the rejected Luna carry the grief she caused," she declared. "Let the dead royal wolf know that the woman who broke his bond now walks beneath his judgment." The crowd murmured approval. Rhaedan said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. Isla reached the first royal tomb. The blue flame bent sharply toward the stone. The tomb cracked. A thin line split across the black surface. The crowd fell silent. Selvera's smile vanished. "Keep walking." Isla did. The second tomb cracked. Then the third. The snow stopped falling. The wolves carved along the tomb road lifted their stone heads. Gasps rippled through the nobles. Guards reached for their swords. Lady Neressa stepped back, her white wolf shadow whining under its breath. Rhaedan descended 1 step. Selvera caught his arm. "Majesty, do not go near her." He looked at the priestess's hand. Slowly, she released him. Isla's heartbeat thundered. The torch flame was no longer blue. Silver-black fire twisted inside it, shaped like fur and wind. She came to the newest tomb, the largest one. The stone was still fresh, still wet with funeral oil. Across its sealed door was carved the name of Rhaedan's wolf spirit, Veyrhold, beloved royal beast. Crown shadow of Veyrhold. Dead by poisoned bond. Isla stared at the inscription until the letters blurred. I did not kill you, she whispered. The torch went out. Every flame on the tomb road died with it. Darkness swallowed the grove. Then the tomb breathed. Not a memory, not a ghost. A living, furious breath from behind sealed stone. The royal tomb split open. The crowd screamed. A massive silver-black wolf spirit forced its way from the grave, shoulder first, then claws. Then a great head crowned in grave moon fire. It was not peaceful. It was not dead. Black burial chains hung from its ribs. Temple runes had been carved into its throat. Its fur burned with cold silver flame, and its eyes carried the same trapped agony Isla had seen in Rhaedan's face every time he looked away from her. Veyrik, the Wolf King's dead spirit. Alive. The beast stepped out of its own tomb. Selvara shouted, "Do not move." The wolf ignored her. It did not go to the king. It did not bow to the crown. It walked past the priests, past the noble widows, past Lady Neressa's trembling white wolf shadow, and stopped behind Isla. Then Varric lowered his enormous head and pressed his muzzle to the faded mate scar beneath her collarbone. Pain exploded through her chest. Isla dropped to one knee. The wolf's memories tore through her. Silver knives under moonlight. Rhaedan unconscious on the bonding altar. Selvara chanting over black chains. Temple guards dragging a living wolf spirit into stone. A false death bell ringing before the beast had stopped breathing. Isla gasped. Rhaedan came down the funeral steps like a storm. For the first time since the rejection, he ran toward her. Selvara's voice cracked across the grove. "Majesty, stop. She is pulling the dead spirit from its grave." Rhaedan halted halfway. The court held its breath. Isla looked up from the frozen road, one hand pressed to her burning mate scar. The risen wolf standing over her like a wounded guardian. Rhaedan stared at Veyrik. The king's face had gone pale. Not afraid. Destroyed. His voice came rough. "Veyrik?" The wolf's throat strained. The temple runes carved there flared black, choking whatever sound tried to escape. Rhaedan saw them. Something in him changed. His grief sharpened into suspicion. He turned slowly toward Selvara. "Why are there temple runes carved into my wolf's throat?" No one spoke. Not the nobles. Not the priests. Not Lady Neressa, whose perfect wolf shadow had crawled behind her dress. Selvara's expression hardened. "Because the dead must be sealed, Majesty. Your grief is confusing you." Rhaedan drew his sword. The steel sang in the dark. "My wolf was buried 7 nights ago," he said. "You told me there was nothing left to save." Selvara lifted her chin. "There was not," Varric growled. The whole tomb road shook. The black chains around the wolf's ribs tightened, and Isla cried out because the pain struck her too. The same chains were biting into the scar of the bond Rhaedan had rejected. She understood then with terrible clarity. The bond had not died when he spoke the rejection. It had been forced underground with his wolf. Rhaedan's eyes snapped to her. "Can you hear him?" Isla could barely breathe. The court stared. The rejected Luna. The woman accused of killing the royal wolf. The woman no one had allowed to speak since the night of the broken bond. Varric pressed his muzzle harder against her scar. A command entered her blood. Not from the king. From the wolf. "Open the tomb." Isla lifted her face to Rhaedan. Her voice shook, but it did not break. The funeral was a lie. The crowd recoiled. Selvara went white. Rhaedan took one step closer. "What did he say?" Isla turned toward the open grave. Inside, beneath the false death shroud, something else began to howl. Not one wolf. Many. Varric's burning eyes fixed on Selvara. Isla rose slowly, the dead funeral torch cold in her hand, the king's living wolf at her back. "He says," she whispered. He was not the only one buried alive. The tomb floor cracked wide, and under the royal grave, an entire chamber of chained wolf spirits began to wake. The chamber beneath the royal grave woke in chains. The sound rose through the cracked tomb floor in layers, claws scraping stone, spirits choking against burial runes. Wolves howling with mouths that had been sealed by priest fire. One voice had been terrifying enough. Many turned the entire burial grove into a throat. The crowd fell back from the tomb road. Nobles stumbled into one another, Guards drew swords, they did not know where to point. Temple acolytes dropped their moon bowls. Lady Neressa's perfect white wolf shadow flattened itself behind her skirts, whining as if the dead below knew its name. High Priestess Selvaera did not move. That was how Isla knew she had expected fear, not discovery. Fear could be guided. Discovery could not. Wolf King Rhaedan stood between Isla and the temple steps, sword in hand, face pale beneath the winter moon. His gaze was fixed on Varric, the silver-black wolf spirit he had mourned as dead. Black burial chains still hung from the beast's ribs. Temple runes still burned across its throat. Every time Varric tried to snarl, the runes tightened, and Isla felt them cut through the faded mate scar beneath her collarbone. The bond was still there, buried, wounded, rejected, but not dead. Rhaedan saw her flinch. His eyes dropped to her scar. For one moment, something like guilt broke through his coldness. Then Selvaera spoke. "Do not mistake grave magic for truth," she said, voice carrying over the shaking road. "A rejected Luna's grief can wake echoes. She has called a dead thing from stone to escape judgment." Varric growled. The ground split wider. Isla steadied herself with the dead funeral torch in one hand. Its flame was gone, but the iron still pulsed cold against her palm. "She did not call him," Rhaedan said. The crowd went silent. Selvaera's eyes sharpened. "Majesty?" Rhaedan turned toward her. He came to her. Those 5 words struck harder than thunder. A few nobles looked at Isla differently. Not kindly. Never that quickly. But uncertainly. Uncertainty was the first crack in a public lie. Selvaera lifted her moonbone staff. "Your grief is speaking. You have been without your wolf for 3 months. The sight of its echo has unsettled your judgment." Rhaedan's jaw tightened. Isla knew that wound. The court had used it against him for months. King without wolf, king without balance, king who must obey the temple until his spirit settled. They had made his pain into a leash. Varric pressed closer behind Isla. A memory tore through her again. Rhaedan lying unconscious beneath the bonding moon. Selvaera's priestesses forcing silver hooks into Varric's spirit body. Lady Neressa holding a white funeral veil. A second wolf shadow crying inside a black reliquary. A tomb door closing while Varric was still fighting. Isla gasped. Rhaedan took one step toward her, then stopped himself. He had touched her once without doubt. Before the rite. He had taken her hand beneath the first moon and told her he did not know how to be gentle, but he would learn. Then the bond shattered. Then Selvaera spoke. Then the entire court looked at Isla like murder wearing a Luna veil. Now he stood near enough to help and far enough to prove he knew he had lost the right. "What do you hear?" he asked. "Note command. Note accusation. Accusation." Isla swallowed around the pain in her chest. He was awake when they buried him. A cry moved through the crowd. Selvaera slammed her staff against the stone. "Lies." Varric's runes flared black. Isla dropped to her knees, choking. Rhaedan moved. This time he did not stop. He knelt in front of her, sword still in one hand, his other hovering near her shoulder but not touching. "Tell me how to stop it." The question nearly broke her. 3 months ago she had begged him to listen. He had stood before the court and said the words that severed her from rank, home, protection, and name. "I reject Isla Vale as Luna." Now he was on one knee before her in the snow, asking. Isla looked past him to Selvaera. "The runes are tied to her staff." Selvaera's face changed. Rhaedan saw it. So did the court. The king rose. "Give me the staff." Selvaera's grip tightened. "This staff bears the law of the old moon temple. No king may touch it without witness from the dead." The tomb beneath them cracked open another foot. A dozen ghostly eyes burned in the darkness below. Rhaedan's voice was low. "Then witness has arrived." Varric lunged. The burial chains snapped taut before he could reach Selvaera, dragging him back so violently Isla screamed with him. Rhaedan's control broke. He swung his sword at the nearest chain, but the blade passed through spirit iron and struck sparks from the stone. Selvaera lifted the staff higher. "See? The beast is unstable. It follows the rejected woman because she poisoned the bond. If she is not sealed with him, his madness will spread." The crowd began to murmur. "Seal her." The words passed from mouth to mouth. Isla heard them and understood the second trap. The first punishment had been shame. The second would be burial. Rhaedan turned toward the crowd with murder in his eyes. No one touches her. Selvara smiled faintly. Then you choose the woman accused of killing your wolf over the kingdom that still follows you? The old court waited. There it was. The blade beneath every royal decision. Choose her. Lose them. Choose them. Bury her. Isla forced herself to stand. Varric's pain shook through her, but she stayed upright. No, she said. The crowd stilled at her voice. She had spoken so little since the rejection that even Rhaedan looked struck by it. No more choosing before witness, she said. Selvara's smile thinned. A rejected Luna does not command witness. Isla lifted the dead funeral torch. The iron rod suddenly reignited. Not blue, grave white. The royal tombs answered. One by one, the black stone wolves lining the road opened their eyes. Selvara stepped back. For the first time, fear touched her face. Varric lowered his head beside Isla. The runes still held his throat closed, but his spirit fire flowed into the torch. The flame stretched toward the open grave, then toward the sealed chamber below. A path appeared in white fire across the cracked stone. Rhaedan stared at it. What is that? Isla's voice shook. A witness road. She did not know how she knew. The knowledge had arrived with Varric's pain. With the torch. With the ancient tombs that had begun listening the moment everyone else stopped. The grave white path led down into the chamber under the royal tomb. Selvara's voice sharpened. Do not step onto that road. Isla turned toward her. Why? No answer. Enough answer. Rhaedan looked at Isla. Do you choose to go down? The question moved through the crowd like a second shock. A king asking a rejected Luna what she chose. Isla looked at the open tomb. At the chamber where many wolves howled. At Varric chained beside her. At the king who had not believed her when belief would have saved them both. Then she looked at Selvara. I choose witness. Rhaedan turned to his guards. Selvara comes with us. The priestess went white. Majesty, and Lady Nerissa. Nerissa flinched violently. I have done nothing. Varric's burning eyes turned toward her. Her white wolf shadow tried to run. It could not. The grave white torch flame pointed at Nerissa's chest. Isla felt another memory rise. Nerissa standing beside the moon altar, holding the funeral veil before Varric was declared dead. Nerissa's wolf shadow drinking from a silver bowl marked with Rhaedan's blood. Selvara whispering, soon the crown will need a calmer queen. Rhaedan saw the flame point. His face hardened. Bring her. Guards seized Nerissa as the court erupted. Rhaedan stepped onto the witness road first, then stopped and moved aside. The gesture was small. It mattered. Isla descended before him, carrying the torch meant to shame her into the grave that had answered her instead. Varric followed at her back. The chamber below was vast, carved beneath the royal tombs in secret. Black pillars held up the earth. Silver chains hung from the ceiling. Along the walls, dozens of wolf spirits were bound in gravestone niches, their throats carved with temple runes, their bodies dim from years of silence. Some were royal, some were not. Some were small enough to have belonged to children. Isla's stomach turned cold. Rhaedan entered behind her and stopped dead. Selvara, he said, voice barely human. What is this? The high priestess said nothing. The torch flame surged toward the largest chain at the center of the chamber. There, beneath a crown of black moonbone, lay the other half of Varric's spirit, his voice, torn from his body and nailed to a funeral altar. Isla understood. Varric had followed her because she carried the only surviving half of the rejected bond. And if his voice remained buried, Rhaedan would never hear the truth from his own wolf. She stepped toward the altar. Selvara screamed, if you free that voice, the king will know everything. Rhaedan turned slowly. Everything? The chamber answered before she could. Varric's buried voice opened its eyes and spoke through Isla. She killed the bond before I could choose my Luna. Varric's voice came through Isla's mouth. The chamber went still. Even the chained wolf spirits stopped struggling. Rhaedan stared at Isla as if the words had struck him through the chest. His sword lowered an inch. The crown of black moonbone above Varric's buried voice trembled. and every chain in the chamber tightened as if the old temple law itself were trying to pull the truth back underground. Isla clutched the grave-white funeral torch with both hands. Her throat burned, though the voice had not been hers. Veyrhold's spirit pressed against her back, huge and wounded, his silver-black fire shaking through the faded mate scar beneath her collarbone. Selvarra Thorne's face turned to stone. Lady Neressa began to cry. Not loudly, not innocently, like someone whose safest lie had finally heard its own death. Rhaedan turned toward Selvarra. What did he mean? The High Priestess lifted her chin. The spirit is unstable. It speaks through the rejected woman because her grief has infected what remains of it. Veyrhold's spirit snarled. The runes on his throat burned black. Isla gasped and nearly dropped the torch. Rhaedan moved toward Selvarra so fast the guards flinched. You will not call my wolf a remnant again. The words were quiet. Deadly. Selvarra's eyes flicked toward the moonbone crown above Veyrhold's buried voice. The crown pulsed once. The chains on the other wolf spirits tightened, and a dozen ghostly beasts cried out in pain. Isla understood the warning. If you threaten her, she said, voice shaking, she hurts them. Rhaedan froze. Selvarra smiled faintly. At last, the rejected Luna learns caution. Isla stepped closer to the central altar. No. I learn where your hand is. The grave-white torch flared. A line of fire ran from the torch to the moonbone crown, then from the crown to Selvarra's staff above in the chamber entrance. The court watching from the tomb road gasped as the witness flame drew the connection for all to see. Selvarra's staff controlled the burial chains. The moonbone crown held Veyrhold's voice, and Neressa's white wolf shadow, trembling beside her, was wrapped in the same black thread. Rhaedan looked at Neressa. Her tears stopped. What did they give you? He asked. Neressa shook her head. I wanted to save the kingdom. That is not what I asked. Her white wolf shadow whined, shrinking from Veyrhold's gaze. Selvarra spoke sharply. Lady Neressa was chosen by temple law to stabilize the crown after your first bond was corrupted. After you corrupted it, Isla said. Selvarra's eyes cut to her. You know nothing, the funeral torch answered. A memory burst across the chamber wall in grave white fire. The bonding altar. Rhaedan and Isla under the full moon. His wolf Veyrhold stepping toward her. Not rejecting her. Not dying choosing. Isla's mate mark glowing whole. Rhaedan's hand reaching for hers. Then Selvarra behind the altar, driving the moonbone staff into a hidden groove. Black chains exploding upward. Neressa holding a silver bowl filled with Rhaedan's blood. The chains tearing Veyrhold's voice from his spirit before he could complete the bond. The memory shifted. Rhaedan unconscious. Isla screaming. Selvarra pressing black ash into the mate mark on Isla's chest. Neressa whispering, will he forget her? Selvarra answering, he will remember pain and call it her name. The vision shattered. The chamber erupted. Rhaedan turned on Neressa with a fury so cold even the guards stepped back. Neressa sobbed. I did not know they would bury him alive. But you knew they would take him from me. Her silence answered. Rhaedan looked as though he might kill her where she stood. Isla stepped between them. The chamber froze again. Rhaedan's eyes snapped to her, brutal with grief. Move. No. The word shook, but it stood. She answers, Isla said. Not dies, not yet. His jaw clenched. After what she did? After what they all did. Isla's grip tightened around the torch. If you kill her now, Selvarra keeps the rest of the names. Veyrhold pressed his muzzle against Isla's shoulder. Rhaedan saw it. The king's anger did not soften, but it became something harder to misuse. He lowered his sword. Neressa collapsed to her knees. Selvarra's smile vanished. Isla turned back to the central altar. Veyrod's buried voice was trapped beneath the moonbone crown, its eyes open inside the black flame. Around the chamber, dozens of wolf spirits watched her from their niches. How do I free him? She asked. Selvarra said nothing. The chamber answered in another voice. Small, broken, from the wall of chained spirits. Name him before the king. Isla turned. A young wolf spirit no larger than a child's shadow struggled against a burial rune. Rhaedan saw it too. His face changed. That one belonged to a child. Selvarra said coldly, Some heirs are born too dangerous to leave whole. The words killed every sound in the chamber. Isla stared at the small wolf spirit, then at the rows of chained beasts, royal wolves, noble wolves, child wolves, mate wolves, not dead, stored, used, buried under funeral law so the temple could decide which souls were safe enough to return to power. Rhaedan's voice was rough. How many? Salvara's lips pressed shut. The funeral torch flared. Numbers appeared in fire across the chamber ceiling. 73. Rhaedan Veyr. Isla felt his grief change, not lessen, widen. His wolf was not the only victim. His pain had been made royal, so others' pain could hide behind it. Veyrhold's spirit lowered its head beside Isla. She understood the first step. She faced Rhaedan. He needs you to name him. Rhaedan looked at the buried voice beneath the crown. Veyrhold. Nothing happened. Isla shook her head. Not as king. His expression tightened. She stepped closer, voice softer. Not as owner. Not as crown. Shadow. Not as weapon. Rhaedan looked at her for a long moment. Then he removed the silver crown from his head. The entire chamber seemed to inhale. Above them, the court watching from the tomb road fell silent. Rhaedan set the crown on the stone floor. Then he knelt before the altar of his buried wolf. Not before Isla. Not before Salvara. Before the soul he had failed to hear. His voice broke around the name. Veyrhold. My first friend. My brother in blood. The wolf I failed when I believed them, instead of the woman you chose. If you still choose to return, I ask. I do not command. The moonbone crown cracked. Salvare screamed. No. The black chains around Veyrold's buried voice snapped one by one. Isla lifted the funeral torch. The flame turned silver white. Veyrold's voice rose from the altar and slammed into the spirit standing behind her. The two halves of the wolf became one. The chamber exploded with grave moon fire. When the light cleared, Veyrold stood whole behind Rhaedan for the first time in 3 months. Enormous. Silver, black, scarred by burial runes, but alive. The king bowed his head. The wolf did not go to him first. It turned to Isla. Then it lowered itself at her feet. The rejected Luna stood with the funeral torch burning in her hands while the Wolf King's restored spirit knelt before her. Above, the court saw everything. Salvara staggered back. Nerissa wept into her hands. Rhaedan lifted his face to Isla. And for the first time since the rejection, the cold king looked afraid of the truth he owed her. Isla, he said quietly. She met his eyes. The bond scar beneath her collarbone blazed silver. But before either of them could speak, every chained wolf spirit in the chamber began to howl the same word. Witness. The word rose from every chained wolf spirit in the burial chamber. Not as a plea, as a demand. The sound shook dust from the black pillars. Silver chains trembled overhead. The moonbone crown Rhaedan had set on the floor rolled once, then stopped at Isla's feet, like a dead thing finally stripped of command. Veyrhold remained kneeling before her. The Wolf King's restored spirit, the beast the court had buried as dead, lowered his scarred silver-black head to the rejected Luna, who had carried his funeral torch. Above the chamber, the nobles watching from the tomb road fell into horrified silence. Rhaedan did not move. His face had gone pale, but his eyes did not leave Isla. The king who had rejected her before the court now stood crownless beneath his own family tombs, watching his wolf give her the reverence he had denied. Salvara's voice cut through the chamber. Do you see what she is doing? The beast is confused by grave magic. If the king lets this continue, every sealed spirit here will turn against the crown. Veyrhold rose. Slowly. The runes carved into his throat still glowed, but they no longer held his voice. When he growled, the chamber answered. 73 chained wolf spirits pulled against their niches. Isla turned toward them. Some were enormous royal beasts, dimmed by years of burial. Some were noble wolf shadows, scarred by temple marks. Some were small, too small, and those hurt the most. Their eyes followed the funeral torch in her hand, as if it were the first light they had seen in a lifetime. Rhaedan's voice was rough. Can they be freed? Salvara laughed once. Freed? Majesty, those spirits were sealed for reasons. Some belonged to traitors, Some to unstable heirs, some to mate, bonds that would have weakened alliances, some to children born under forbidden moons. Children, Isla said. Her voice was quiet. The torch flame turned white. Selvara's mouth tightened. Isla walked to the nearest small wolf spirit. It was trapped behind a lattice of silver bone, its paws pressed to the barrier, its throat marked with the same temple runes Varric had carried. "What is your name?" Isla whispered. The spirit tried to answer. The rune burned black. The little wolf collapsed. Isla flinched as pain pierced her chest. Rhaedan stepped closer. "Isla." She lifted one hand to stop him, not because she rejected help, because this pain was telling her something. "The torch feels them," she said. "Every chain, every sealed throat, every name they were forbidden to speak." Rhaedan looked at the funeral torch. "Why you?" Selvara answered too quickly. "Because she poisoned the first bond." The dead answer corruption. Varric's eyes flashed. Isla turned slowly toward the priestess. "No." The dead answer what was left unburied. The chamber changed. The grave-white torch flame stretched toward Isla's fated mate Scar, then toward Varric, then toward the chained spirits. A line of fire appeared on the floor, forming an old circle around the chamber. Not a prison. A court. The black pillars lit one by one. Names began to appear across them, carved in fire. Wolves sealed under false funeral law. Wolves declared dead while still living. Wolves removed from heirs, brides, rivals, children, and mates. Rhaedan read the names as they appeared. His jaw tightened. "Selvara," he said. "Why is my brother's wolf here?" The chamber went silent. Isla looked at him. Rhaedan had never spoken of a brother in court. Selvara's face became unreadable. On the farthest pillar, a name burned brighter than the rest. Rhaedan Veyr, second royal son. Wolf spirit sealed before succession trial. Declared stillborn by temple order. Rhaedan stared at the name. For a moment, he was not the Wolf King. He was a man discovering he had mourned a lie his entire life. "My brother lived?" Selvara said nothing. Rhaedan's hand closed around his sword. "Answer me." Lady Nerissa, still guarded near the stair, began to shake. "My father knew," she whispered. Every eye turned toward her. Nerissa's perfect white wolf shadow whimpered and tried to hide behind her. Rhaedan's voice dropped. "What did your father know?" Nerissa swallowed. "That royal wolves were sealed to control succession. That if your brother's wolf had awakened, he would have had the stronger claim. Selvara's temple named him stillborn, so no faction could divide the throne." Rhaedan looked at Selvara. The priestess did not deny it. Instead, she raised her chin. "And because of that choice, you became king. The kingdom remained whole. Your father approved the record." A sound left Rhaedan's throat. Not grief, not rage, something older than both. Varric pressed against him, but the wolf's eyes stayed on Isla, as if warning her the chamber still had more to reveal. The funeral torch pulled her toward the central altar again. Isla followed. Beneath Varric's broken chains, another slab had begun to open. Inside lay old funeral ledgers bound in black hide. The top record opened by itself. The first page bore Isla's name. Isla Vale Luna candidate. Compatible grave moon blood. If rejected publicly, may serve as living carrier for buried royal wolf. Do not kill, unless torch bond awakens. Isla's knees weakened. Rhaedan grabbed the ledger before it could close. He read the words once, then again. His face darkened. "They planned your rejection," Selvara said coldly. "We planned containment." Rhaedan turned on her. "You made me reject my mate so you could use her as a carrier for my buried wolf? You would have died if the bond completed uncontrolled. You do not know that. I know what the prophecy said." The torch flame snapped toward the ledger. Another hidden line burned beneath the first. "The king dies when he claims a Luna whose fire he does not ask to carry. The king lives when the rejected one opens the graves by choice." Rhaedan went still. Isla stared at the words. Choice. That word again. The thing no one had given her when they forced the torch into her hands. The thing no one had given Rhaedan when they used grief to guide his throne. The thing no sealed wolf had received before temple law named its silence necessary. The small wolf spirit whimpered behind the silver bone. Isla turned to it. "What happens if I open the chains?" she asked. Selvara's answer came sharp. "Chaos." Rhaedan looked at Varric. "What happens if we do not?" Varric's restored voice moved through the chamber like grave thunder. "Then they remain useful to liars." Isla closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking. The torch had been meant to humiliate her. Now it burned with every spirit waiting beneath the royal tombs. But she was not foolish enough to believe power made her invincible. If she broke everything at once, Selvara might be right. Pain could become madness, and madness could become slaughter. She opened her eyes. "No spirit is freed by force," she said. The chamber listened. No tomb opens without name. No wolf returns to a body, house, heir, or crown without choice. No temple touches these chains again. The grave white fire flared. Witness accepted. The first small wolf spirit lifted its head. Isla looked at it gently. "Do you choose to speak?" The runes on its throat cracked. A child's voice echoed from the wall. "My name is Kieran. Rhaedan." The small wolf spirit stepped out from behind the silver bone. Not toward the crown. Not toward Selvara. Toward Rhaedan. It stopped before him, trembling. Rhaedan dropped to his knees. Not as king. As brother. He reached out, then stopped before touching. "Do you choose me?" The small wolf spirit looked at Varric, then at Isla. Then it pressed its forehead to Rhaedan's palm. The entire chamber burned silver. Above them, the royal court saw the first sealed spirit return by choice. Selvara's face twisted with fury. Nerissa began to weep again. And on every black pillar in the chamber, more names ignited. Dozens of buried wolves were ready to speak. But before Isla could ask the next name, the fresh royal tomb above them slammed shut. The passage to the surface sealed. Selvara smiled. "If witness must be chosen," she said, "then let the court above choose whether you ever leave this grave." The burial chamber went dark, and from outside the sealed tomb, the nobles began chanting for the rejected Luna to be buried with the wolves. Their voices came through the sealed tomb like stones dropped into a grave. "Bury her. Seal the curse. Protect the king." Isla stood in the dark beneath the royal tombs with the grave white funeral torch trembling in her hands. Around her, 73 wolf spirits shifted in their chains, their eyes glowing through the blackness. Varric stood beside Rhaedan, restored but scarred, his silver-black body tense with fury. The small spirit of Kieran pressed close to the king's knee, trembling at the sound of the court that had erased him before he could live. Rhaedan looked up at the sealed passage. For a moment, Isla saw the old king in him return the ruler who could silence a hall with one command. The man who had learned to survive by turning grief into iron. Then he looked at her. Not at the torch. Not at Varric. At her. The woman he had rejected because they had taught him her name meant pain. "I will open it," he said. Selvara laughed softly in the dark. "With what? Your crown is above. Your court is above. Your guards are above. Down here, you are only a man standing among the dead," he failed. The words landed cruelly because they were almost true. Rhaedan's hand tightened around his sword. Isla stepped toward him. "No." His eyes cut to hers. "If you break the tomb by force," she said, "they will say you were bewitched. They will say I turned you against the court. They will bury the truth under another story." Above them, the chanting grew louder. "Bury her. Bury her. Bury her." The words pressed against Isla's ribs, finding every wound the court had left there. 3 months ago, those same voices had called her traitor, poisoner, failed Luna. She had thought nothing could feel worse than being rejected by the man whose wolf had chosen her. She was wrong. Worse was realizing they wanted her dead not because they believed she had killed the wolf, but because his survival would prove they had enjoyed her ruin. Varric growled. The torch flame rose higher. The sealed chamber answered with a ring of pale fire around Isla's feet. Selvara's smile faded. Isla looked at the high priestess. "You sealed the passage. I protected the kingdom. You trapped the king. I preserved the crown. You buried children." Selvara's eyes hardened. "I buried threats before they became wars." The small wolf spirit Kieran whimpered. Rhaedan went still. Isla turned toward the child wolf. "Kieran, Do you choose witness? The little spirit lifted its head. Yes. The word was small, but the chamber shook. A line of fire shot from Kieran to the sealed ceiling. Above, the chanting faltered. A child's voice echoed through the tomb road, where every noble could hear it. My name is Rhaedan Veyr. I was not stillborn. My wolf was sealed so no one could challenge the crown. Silence fell above. Not full silence. Frightened silence. Rhaedan closed his eyes. Pain crossed his face, raw and unhidden. Then he opened them and looked at Selvara. You stole my brother. Selvara's voice sharpened. Your father agreed. The torch flame snapped to the funeral ledger. Another page opened. King Rhaedan Veyr approved sealing of second heir's wolf spirit under temple council. Public record altered to stillbirth. Crown stability preserved. Rhaedan read it. No one spoke. His father's name stood there in grave white fire. Isla watched him closely. This was the test. Not whether he could rage against Selvara. That was easy. The harder thing was whether he could let truth touch his own bloodline without turning away. Rhaedan took the page from the ledger and held it up toward the sealed tomb ceiling. Let them hear it. The chamber carried his voice upward. My father's name stands under witness. Above, the court erupted in shock. Selvara's expression cracked. She had expected him to defend the royal dead. Instead, he accused them. Varric stepped closer to Rhaedan, his restored spirit burning brighter. The grave white torch flared in Isla's hands. Witness accepted. The sealed passage cracked once. A thin line of moonlight entered the chamber. Selvara moved suddenly. She drove her staff against the floor and shouted an old temple command. Black burial chains whipped from the walls, not toward Rhaedan, but toward Isla. They wrapped around her wrists, her waist, her throat, dragging the funeral torch downward. Rhaedan Longu. Varric lunged with him. The chains struck them both back. Selvara's voice rang through the chamber. If the rejected Luna dies with the torch, every witness road closes. Isla hit the floor hard. The torch rolled from her hands but did not go out. The chains tightened around her throat. Rhaedan shouted her name. Above, the nobles heard him. Isla could not breathe. Selvara knelt beside her, eyes bright with fear disguised as triumph. You should have stayed humiliated. Humiliated women survive. Women who open graves become graves. Isla's vision blurred. The torch flame flickered inches from her hand. She reached for it. The chains tightened. Then Kieran's small wolf spirit stepped between Isla and Selvara. No, the child said. Selvara frozi. One by one, other chained wolf spirits lifted their heads. A royal wolf with a torn ear. A mother wolf with temple runes across her chest. A young wolf missing half its moonfire. A scarred border wolf whose name had been scratched off the ledger. They could not break their own chains fully. Not yet. But they could choose. The first spirit spoke. My name is Maelor. Another. My name is Sava. Another. My name is Oren. Names filled the chamber. With each one, a chain around Isla weakened. Rhaedan crawled through the pressure of the burial spell, reaching for her. Varric forced his body against the black chains, breaking them with raw spirit fire. Isla's fingers closed around the torch. The flame exploded. Grave white fire swept through the chamber, burning every chain that touched a named spirit. Selvara screamed and stumbled back, her staff cracking down its center. The chains around Isla fell away. She dragged air into her lungs. Rhaedan reached her side but stopped before touching. His face was haunted. Can I help you? Even now. Even here. The question hit her harder than the chains had. Isla nodded. He lifted her carefully, one arm around her only because she leaned into it first. The court above could see them through the crack now. The rejected Luna alive, the king holding her with permission, the dead wolf standing guard behind them, the sealed spirits naming themselves in fire. Selvara tried to rise. Varric placed one massive paw over her staff. It shattered. The sealed passage above cracked wider. Moonlight poured down. The nobles saw the burial chamber. They saw Kieran beside Rhaedan. They saw the 73 wolf spirits. They saw Selvara on the floor with the broken staff. And they saw Isla holding the funeral torch that had become a witness flame. Rhaedan looked up at the court. His voice carried through the tomb road. No one buries her. The words silenced everything. Then Isla stepped away from his arm, standing on her own though her body shook. She lifted the torch toward the court that had chanted for her grave. "No one is buried tonight," she said. "Not until every wolf speaks." The royal tomb split fully open. The witness road rose from the chamber to the surface, and the first 73 buried wolf spirits followed Isla into the moonlight. The court did not cheer. It recoiled. That was how Isla knew the truth had struck deep. Joy would have been easier to dismiss. Awe could be twisted into superstition. But fear meant the nobles understood that the dead had not risen as monsters. They had risen as witnesses. The royal tomb road glowed grave white from end to end. Stone wolves bowed their carved heads. Snow hung frozen in the air. The crowd that had been chanting for Isla's burial now stood trapped between the open grave and the spirits they had helped forget. Veyrhold walked behind Isla, enormous and silver black, the last broken pieces of temple runes burning away from his throat. Beside Rhaedan stood Kieran's small wolf spirit, trembling but unchained. Around them moved the others: Maelor, Sava, Orin, and dozens more, each spirit carrying scars from the law that had buried them. Rhaedan came up from the tomb last, crownless, his sword lowered. High Priestess Selvarra was dragged behind him in plain iron. Her moonbone staff was broken. Her robes were torn, but her face still carried the cold pride of someone who believed fear would eventually return to her side. Lady Neressa stood near the front of the court, pale beneath her white fur cloak. Her perfect wolf shadow had shrunk until it looked thin, almost borrowed, its eyes fixed on the spirits with terror. Isla saw it. So did Veyrhold. The great wolf growled. Neressa flinched. Rhaedan turned toward her. "What did they give you?" Neressa's lips trembled. "Nothing." The funeral torch burned brighter in Isla's hands. A line of grave white fire moved from the torch to Neressa's wolf shadow. The white beast whined and tried to retreat, but the flame followed. Its fur flickered, revealing black burial thread beneath the illusion. The crowd gasped. Rhaedan's voice dropped. "Neressa." Tears filled her eyes. "I wanted to be queen." The confession was small. "Ugly. Human." Selvarra hissed. Silence. Neressa looked at the broken staff, then at Veyrhold, then at Isla. For the first time, her fear pointed away from losing power and toward what power had made of her. "They told me you were too wounded to rule without a new Luna," Neressa whispered to Rhaedan. "They said Isla's bond had poisoned you. They said if I carried a clean wolf, shadow, the court would settle. My father gave Selvarra access to our family crypt. She said the white wolf was from an old thorn line. I did not ask whose spirit it had been." Isla's grip tightened on the torch. "Whose?" she asked. Neressa lowered her eyes. "I do not know," the torch answered. The white wolf shadow behind Neressa split open in pale fire. Inside it, another spirit cried out. Not a noble beast. A young female wolf, silver gray, bound with bridal thread. Her real shape pushed against the false white glamour, trembling and furious. A name appeared across the snow. Isla Vale wolf spirit removed after failed Luna candidacy. Declared fever dead. Used to shape replacement bride shadow. Isla could not breathe. Vale. Her own house. Her cousin Alira, who had vanished when Isla was 12. The family had said fever took her after a rejected court proposal. Isla remembered a laughing girl who loved running barefoot through winter fields and said she would rather bite a prince than marry one. Rhaedan read the name. His face hardened with fresh horror. Neressa covered her mouth. "I did not know." Isla looked at her. "But you did not ask." The words landed. Neressa bowed her head. No excuse came. Good. Isla turned to the trapped wolf within the white shadow. "Alira, do you choose to leave that shape?" The wolf spirit snapped its head toward her. Its eyes flared. Yes. The white glamour shattered. Neressa screamed and fell to her knees as the false shadow ripped away from her body. The silver-gray wolf spirit landed in the snow, shook itself free, and walked straight to Isla. It did not kneel. It pressed its forehead to Isla's hand. A memory flashed through Isla. Alira laughing under moonlight. Alira refusing a bride contract. Alira being dragged into the temple crypt while Selvarra said, "Some wild blood must be repurposed." Isla's eyes filled. She did not let tears fall yet. There were too many watching. Selvara laughed softly from her chains. Now you see the danger. Every name you open wounds someone living. Nerissa loses her shadow. The court loses order. Houses lose claims. How many lives will you ruin to comfort the dead? Isla turned slowly. The dead were ruined first. The torch flared. Witness accepted. Rhaedan stepped toward the crowd. Lady Nerissa will live under witness. A noble shouted. She helped steal Aluna's wolf. Rhaedan looked at Isla. He did not decide over her. The court saw the pause. Isla understood what he was asking without words. Not permission to rule, but space. To not repeat the old crime. She lives, Isla said. She names every shadow she wore, every priest who dressed it, every house that paid for it. Nerissa sobbed into the snow. Selvara's smile disappeared again. One by one, the returned spirits gathered around the tomb road. The grave white fire began to reveal records on the stones. Hidden funerals, false stillbirths, altered Luna bonds, sealed wolves used to strengthen noble shadows, royal spirits buried before they could refuse commands. The court was no longer watching a miracle. It was watching its own ledger open. Rhaedan lifted his crown from where a guard had carried it from the steps. For a moment, the nobles leaned forward, desperate for the old shape of power to return. Instead, Rhaedan placed the crown on the snow before the open tomb. My crown stands under witness, he said. Until every spirit buried under royal funeral law is named. No Luna is chosen. No bride contract sealed. No temple rite obeyed without witness. The crowd broke into chaos. Selvara shouted over them. Without funeral law, royal wolves may refuse the throne. Varric's voice thundered across the road. Then the throne must learn to be refused. Silence fell again. Isla looked at Rhaedan. So did the entire kingdom. This was the next test. The old Rhaedan would have fought that sentence. The king raised by crowns and commands would have called refusal rebellion, but the crownless man standing beside the open tomb only lowered his head once. So be it. The grave white torch burned high. Across the burial grove, more tomb doors began to crack. Not open yet. Waiting. Names glowed behind them. Choices waited behind them. Isla understood then that this was only the first burial road. The royal tombs were connected to every old moon chapel in Veyrhold. Selvara saw the realization on her face and whispered, "You cannot open them all." Isla looked at the 73 spirits behind her, at Varric restored, at Kieran free, at Alira standing beside her hand, at Rhaedan's crown on the snow. "No," she said. "Not alone." The torch flame split into dozens of smaller grave white sparks. Each spark moved to a freed wolf spirit. Each spirit received one. A witness flame. Rhaedan turned to his guards. "Send riders to every moon chapel. No priest enters a crypt alone. No noble burns a ledger. No spirit is moved without name and choice." Then he looked at Isla. This time his voice was quieter. "Will you lead the first witness?" The court held its breath. The rejected Luna. The woman they had forced to carry shame. The woman who now held the flame every buried wolf followed. Isla could have said no. That mattered. She let the silence remind them of it. Then she lifted the torch. "I will lead until every false funeral is opened," she said. "Not as your Luna. Not as your absolution. As witness." Rhaedan accepted the words with a bow of his head. Behind them, the first old moon chapel bell began to ring. Then another. Then another. Across Veyrhold, the buried wolves had heard the torch, and they were calling back. The first old moon chapel bell rang like a warning. Then the second answered. Then the third. Across Veyrhold, bells that had not been touched by human hands in generations began to toll under the winter moon. Their sound rolled over mountains, forests, frozen rivers, border villages, noble estates, and ruined pack roads. Each bell carried the same message from the burial grove. The torch had awakened. The wolves were calling back. The court stood in terror on the royal tomb road, watching grave white sparks fly from Isla's funeral torch and settle into the chests of the freed wolf spirits. Each spirit became a witness flame. Each flame pointed toward another sealed place, another hidden grave, another old funeral that had never truly been a funeral. Rhaedan's guards waited for orders. The nobles waited for the king to reclaim control. The priests waited for Selvarra to save them with some old law. But Selvarra stood in chains now, her broken moonbone staff lying in pieces at Veyrhold's feet. Her eyes remained cold, yet Isla saw the first crack beneath that coldness. Not fear of death, fear of records. "Your Majesty," one noble lord said, voice shaking, "this cannot leave the burial grove. If every chapel opens tonight, the border houses will accuse the crown of corpse magic. Rival packs will march. The old families will rise against you." Rhaedan looked at him. "Because their dead may speak? Because order depends on sealed history." Veyrhold growled. The noble went silent. Isla held the torch closer to her chest. The grave white flame no longer felt like fire. It felt like a heartbeat shared by the buried, the living, and the truths that had waited too long beneath stone. Lady Neressa knelt in the snow nearby, stripped of the false white wolf shadow she had worn. The freed spirit of Isla Vale stood beside Isla, silver gray and fierce, watching her former cage with bright wounded eyes. Kieran's small wolf spirit remained beside Rhaedan, no longer shaking as much. Rhaedan turned to Isla. "Which chapel answers first?" Isla closed her eyes. The torch pulled in 3 directions at once. One flame bent north toward the Frostpine Chapel. One bent east toward the Thorn Widow Crypt. One burned low and sharp toward the Old Moon Chapel inside the palace walls. That last flame hurt. Not like danger, like recognition. Isla opened her eyes. "The palace chapel." Selvarra laughed softly. Everyone turned toward her. The high priestess lifted her chained hands. "Of course it calls first. The Old Moon Chapel is where the first rejected Luna was sealed. You want witness? Begin with the woman who made your kind dangerous." Isla's grip tightened. "My kind?" "Rejected Lunas." Selvarra's smile thinned. "Women who survive broken bonds and learn to hear what the crown cannot." The temple did not begin sealing wolves because of ambition. It began because one rejected Luna burned half the kingdom with grief. Rhaedan's gaze sharpened. "Name her." Selvarra said nothing. The torch answered. A name burned across the snow between them. Vale Ashvale first rejected Luna. Grave Moon Witness. Sealed under Palace Chapel, after refusing second burial law. The court murmured. Isla stared at the name. Ashvale, her mother's line. She had heard the name only in fragments. A disgraced bloodline. A woman blamed for wolf plague, chapel fire, and royal ruin. Isla had grown up warned never to claim Ashvale blood too loudly, even after her house fell low enough that no one cared to investigate its shame. Selvarra watched understanding bloom across her face. "Yes," the priestess whispered. "That is why the funeral torch answered you. You are not merely a rejected Luna. You are her blood." The nobles recoiled as if bloodline itself were contagious. Rhaedan stepped closer to Isla, but not in front of her. "What was Morel sealed for?" Selvarra's eyes glittered. "Ask the chapel." The palace moon chapel stood beyond the burial grove, half hidden beneath a veil of cypress trees and black ice. No weddings were held there anymore. No births blessed. No royal wolves named. The court called it abandoned. The torch flame called that a lie. Rhaedan ordered the witness party forward. Isla with the torch. Varric and the freed spirits. Rhaedan crownless beside her. Selvarra in plain iron. Neressa under guard. 3 scribes, 2 servant witnesses, and 1 noble from each major house so none could later claim they had not seen. The walk to the palace chapel felt longer than the tomb road. No one mocked Isla now. That silence did not feel like respect yet. It felt like fear learning a new posture. At the chapel doors, the grave white flame stretched from Isla's torch and touched the old moon seal. The black wood groaned. Frost cracked from the hinges. A voice from inside whispered through the door. "Who carries the flame?" Isla swallowed. "Not Luna. Not rejected. Not absolution. Isla Vale," she said. Then after a heartbeat she added, "Ashvale blood." The doors opened. Inside, the chapel was not empty. Hundreds of funeral veils hung from the ceiling, each one gray with dust. The altar was covered in black wolf fur. Beneath the floor, something breathed. Along the walls, old murals showed women carrying torches before tombs, while wolves walked behind them not as punishments, but as witnesses. The temple had rewritten the rite. The funeral torch had never been meant to shame a rejected Luna. It had been meant to let buried wolves choose who could hear them. Isla stepped inside. The torch flame surged toward the altar. The floor cracked. Beneath the chapel lay a circular chamber filled with ash and moonbone. At its center stood a stone coffin wrapped in silver chains. On top of it rested a broken Luna crown. Rhaedan's voice was low. Mirel. Heh. Selvara spoke from behind them. Careful, Majesty. She hated kings. Isla descended first. The chamber air tasted of old smoke. When she reached the coffin, the grave-white torch bent until the flame touched the broken Luna crown. The silver chains trembled. A woman's voice rose from inside the stone. Do not open me for a king. Isla closed her eyes. I did not come for a king. The chamber stilled. I came because they forced me to carry a torch meant to shame me. Isla said. And the dead followed. A long silence. Then the coffin cracked. Ash lifted from the seam, shaping itself into the outline of a woman with long dark hair, burned hands, and wolf-fire eyes. Vale Ashvale rose above her own sealed grave. Not alive, not dead, but present enough to make every flame in the chapel bow. Higasa passed over Rhaedan and stopped on Isla, another rejected daughter. The word struck Isla in the chest. Mirel looked at the torch, then at Varric, then at Selvara. The temple still teaches kings to fear what wounded women hear. Selvara's lips tightened. You burned 3 chapels. Mirel's ash eyes turned toward her. After they buried 31 wolves alive and called it mercy, the chapel walls ignited with memory. Not destructive fire, witness fire. Images spread across the murals. The first rejected Luna carrying a torch through a battlefield of sealed wolf spirits. Priests dragging wolves into crypts. Kings signing funeral laws. Noble families using spirit burials to erase rivals. Mirel refusing to let the dead remain useful to liars. Then the final memory appeared. Mirel standing before the palace chapel, torch in hand, while the first Selvara of the old moon temple accused her of witchfire. A king she had once loved turned away. The chapel doors closed. The Luna crown broke. Her wolf was sealed beneath the altar with her. Isla looked at Rhaedan. He saw it too. The pattern was older than them, older than his rejection, older than Selvara's staff. Rhaedan's face hardened with grief. The funeral law was built to silence rejected Lunas. Mirel answered. It was built to silence wolves who chose them. Varric stepped forward and lowered his head to the ash spirit. Mirel's gaze softened only slightly. This one remembered too late. Rhaedan flinched. Isla did not protect him from the truth. He did not ask her to. Mirel turned back to Isla. The grave-white flame climbed higher between them. If you carry this torch, every buried wolf will know you. Every house that built itself on false funerals will hunt you. Every king who fears refusal will call you curse. Isla's throat tightened. She thought of the court chanting for her burial, of Selvara's chains, of Rhaedan's rejection, of Varric pressing his muzzle to her scar, of Kieran speaking his name for the first time, of Alera's spirit trapped inside another woman's shadow. I know, she whispered. No, Mirel said. You do not. Not yet. The coffin split wider. Beneath Mirel's broken crown lay a hidden ledger bound in wolfhide and ash. Selvara surged against her guards. Do not let her touch that. Too late. The ledger opened in front of Isla. Names poured across the pages. Not 73. Hundreds. Then thousands. False funerals across Veyrhold. Rejected Lunas used as carriers. Royal wolves declared dead while still living. Children sealed before succession trials. Mate bonds buried when they threatened alliances. Old chapel fires blamed on women who had tried to open the graves. At the final page, one name burned brighter than all others. Isla Vale Ashvale, final Torchbearer. If awakened, may open the first grave road. The chapel went silent. Rhaedan looked at her. First grave road? Mirel's ash form darkened. The road beneath all royal roads. the place where the first wolf spirit was bound to a crown. Selvara began to laugh, low and broken. Now you understand. If she opens that, funeral law does not merely end. The crown's first command over wolves ends with it. Veyrhold's voice filled the chamber. Then let it end. Rhaedan looked at his restored wolf, then at Isla. The bond scar beneath her collarbone burned, but this time it did not feel like pain alone. It felt like a door. Morel held out one ash-black hand. Choose carefully, rejected daughter. Some graves do not open without taking something back. Isla looked at the torch, then at the king who had once chosen the court over her. Rhaedan did not speak. He did not tell her to do it. He did not tell her not to. He waited. That was the first apology power knew how to give. Isla lifted the funeral torch. I opened the first grave road, she said. But not for the crown. The chapel floor split beneath her feet. Far below Veyrhold, something ancient howled, and every wolf in the kingdom went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that did not belong to fear, sleep, or death. It fell across Veyrhold in one breath, swallowing the howls from the royal tomb road, the chapel bells, the wind moving through the cypress trees, even the soft growl in Veyrhold's chest. Then the ground beneath Isla opened. The first grave road was not a road of stone. It was a wound under the kingdom. Pale steps descended through darkness, older than the royal tombs, older than the moon chapel, older than the first crown. Along both sides stood wolf statues without eyes, their mouths sealed with black iron. Between them burned narrow lines of grave-white fire, leading down into a place where no living court had ever held witness. Isla stood at the top with the funeral torch in her hand. The flame had changed again. It was no longer blue, no longer grave-white. At its center burned a black moon, small and steady, surrounded by silver fire. Morel Ashvale's ash spirit hovered behind her broken coffin, watching with an expression that was not mercy. Selvara's face had gone pale. Rhaedan saw it and turned toward her. What is below? The high priestess said nothing. Veyrhold answered instead. The first chain. The words rolled through the chapel like thunder behind a closed door. Isla looked down the stairs. The first chain to what? Morel's ash eyes fixed on Rhaedan. To the first king who taught wolves to obey crowns before choice. The chamber seemed to tighten around them. Rhaedan's hand lowered slowly from his sword. For once no one spoke. Not the priests. Not the nobles. Not the guards. Not even Neressa. Still pale and shaking near the chapel wall, Isla felt the weight of every eye move to the Wolf King. If the first chain belonged to his crown, then the truth beneath this road would not simply expose Selvara. It would accuse the foundation of Veyrhold itself. Rhaedan looked at Isla. There was no command in his face now, only dread, and the decision not to hide from it. I go with you, he said. Selvara laughed, but the sound broke halfway. Of course you do. Kings always walk toward what they think they can survive. Isla turned to her. You come too. Selvara's smile vanished. No. The torch flame pointed at her chest. You named yourself protector of funeral law, Isla said. Then witness what protected it. Rhaedan gave the order. Bring her. They descended with a small witness group. Isla carrying the torch. Rhaedan crownless beside her. Veyrhold and the freed spirits following. Kieran close to the king's side. Illyra beside Isla, Morel's ash spirit drifting behind. Selvara bound in plain iron, Neressa under guard, and 3 scribes whose hands shook too badly to write until Isla told them to breathe. The first grave road swallowed the chapel above. Halfway down, the walls changed. They were no longer carved stone. They were memory. On the left, Isla saw wolves running free beside early tribes. No crowns, no thrones, no royal tombs. On the right, she saw the first king kneeling before a vast black wolf beneath a blood moon, asking not for partnership, but for command. The black wolf refused. The first king smiled. Then priests brought chains. The memory vanished before Isla could look away. Rhaedan had seen it too. His face hardened, but he did not deny it. At the bottom of the road stood a circular chamber with no ceiling, though they were deep beneath the earth. Above them hung a dark moon, enormous and close, its surface scarred with silver cracks. At the center of the chamber, a colossal wolf spirit lay bound by a chain of crowns. Not one crown, hundreds. Every royal crown in Veyrhold's history, melted into links and driven through the wolf's ribs. Its fur was black as the space between stars. Its eyes were closed. Its throat was sealed with the first funeral rune. Isla nearly dropped the torch. The spirits behind her lowered their heads. Even Varric bowed. Rhaedan whispered, "Who is that?" Morel answered, "The first wolf that refused a king." Selvara's voice came thin. "The old law says it was a beast of chaos." The black wolf opened one eye. The chamber shook. "Not chaos," its voice said. "Refusal." Every crown chain rattled. Rhaedan staggered as if something had struck his chest. Varric pressed against him, keeping him upright. The first wolf's gaze moved past the king and settled on Isla. Torchbearer. The word entered her bones. Isla stepped forward despite the terror rising in her throat. "Were you buried alive too?" The black wolf's eye burned silver. "All wolves bound to crowns were buried through me." The truth unfolded in the dark. The first funeral law had not begun as mourning. It had begun as punishment. A wolf that refused royal command was declared dead, sealed beneath crown law, and used to teach every future royal wolf that obedience was survival. Over centuries, the temple and crown turned that first chain into ritual. Bury the rebellious wolf. Silence the inconvenient mate. Name the disobedient woman cursed. And call the grave peace. Isla turned toward Rhaedan. His face looked shattered. "My crown was built on this." Selvara seized the moment. "And without it, the royal wolves may abandon kings. Armies may fracture. Border pacts may challenge succession. The kingdom may burn." Selvara seized the moment. "The kingdom may burn." Rhaedan looked at the colossal wolf, then at Varric, then at Kieran, the brother erased for being inconvenient to power. His voice came low. "If the kingdom only stands because wolves cannot refuse, then it is already burning." The torch flared. Witness accepted. The first wolf's eye shifted to Isla. "Break the chain," Selvara screamed. "Do not! If that chain breaks, every royal wolf may choose whether to follow its king. Some will leave. Some will turn on their houses. Some will refuse old blood entirely." Isla looked at the crown chain. It was enormous. Too powerful for her hands. Too old for one flame. Then she understood. "I cannot break it alone." Rhaedan stepped forward. "What do you need?" Isla looked at him. "Not your strength." He stilled. "Your permission?" he asked. "No." The word rang through the chamber. She looked at the crownless king. "Your refusal." Rhaedan understood slowly. The first chain had been created by a king demanding obedience. It could only weaken when a king refused to inherit that demand. Rhaedan walked to the crown chain and placed his sword on the ground. Then he knelt before the first wolf. Not as ruler. As descendant of every ruler who had benefited. "I refuse command over any wolf that does not choose me," he said. "I refuse funeral law. I refuse buried obedience. I refuse the crown's right to call refusal death." The crown chain cracked. Selvara fell to her knees, screaming. Isla lifted the funeral torch. The freed wolf spirits behind her spoke their names one by one. Kieran, Alira, Maelor, Sava, Orin, Varric, Morel. Each name became fire. Each fire struck the chain. The first wolf opened both eyes. Isla touched the torch to the first crown link. The chain broke. The sound tore through Veyrhold. Above them, every royal tomb opened. Every old moon chapel split. Every wolf shadow in the kingdom inhaled at once. And in the first grave chamber, the colossal black wolf rose to its feet, no longer buried, no longer dead, no longer owned. It did not bow to Rhaedan. It turned to Isla. Then it lowered its head before the rejected Luna who had carried the funeral torch as shame and made it witness. Selvara whispered, broken, "You have ended the crown." Rhaedan looked at Isla, then at the first wolf, then at the broken chain of crowns. "No," he said. His voice was quiet. "We have ended its leash." The first grave road blazed open behind them, and from every open tomb in Veyrhold, the buried wolves began walking home. They rose from royal graves first. then from old moon chapels, then from border crypts, noble burial gardens, ruined pack shrines, widow towers, children's vaults, and forgotten stone circles hidden beneath frozen forests. Some came as silver mist, some as black fire, some limped on 3 legs, some carried temple runes across their throats. Some were so young their paws barely touched the snow. The kingdom did not wake to peace. It woke to wolves at the doors. In the palace chapel, the first grave road blazed behind Isla like a wound of light. The colossal black wolf stood beside her, no longer chained, its dark fur burning with silver cracks. Varric stood near Rhaedan, whole but scarred. Kieran's small spirit pressed close to the king. Alira remained beside Isla, watchful and fierce. Selvarra knelt in plain iron, her face gray with shock. For the first time, she looked less like a priestess, more like a woman whose god had refused to lie for her. Rhaedan looked up toward the cracked chapel ceiling. Through it, they could hear the palace erupting above them. Bells, screams, guards shouting, nobles calling for horses, servants crying out as wolves passed through walls toward names they had been denied. A captain rushed down the broken stair, breathless. Majesty, the city gates are filling. Spirits are entering the lower districts. Some are stopping at houses. Some are standing before noble doors. The council asks for your command. Rhaedan looked at Isla. The captain saw it and went still. The court had spent years teaching men to wait for the king. Now the king was waiting for the rejected Luna with the funeral torch. Isla's hand tightened around the flame. She felt every wolf that had risen. Not as voices all at once, but as pressure beneath her skin. Need, memory, rage, confusion, choice trembling after generations of command. If she told them to stop, she would become another leash. If she let them run without witness, grief could become blood. She lifted the torch. No wolf enters a house by force, she said. No house hides a name. Every spirit stands before the door that buried it, and every living person inside comes out under witness. The first wolf lowered its vast head. The command is not command when it protects choice. The torch flared. Across the city, the buried wolves stopped, not because Isla owned them, because witness had spoken a rule they could refuse. Rhaedan turned to the captain. Send it through every bell tower. No soldier strikes a spirit unless a living body is attacked. No noble burns records. No priest opens a rite. Every house named by a wolf sends witness to the royal square before moonset. The captain bowed and ran. Selvarra laughed hoarsely. You think rules will hold them? Those wolves have been buried for centuries. You have released hunger, not justice. Isla turned toward her. Then you will help name what they are hungry for. I will not. The first wolf looked at Selvarra. The chamber darkened. Selvarra's mouth closed. Not by force. By fear. Rhaedan stepped toward her. You will live. Selvarra's eyes flashed. Mercy? No, he said. Memory. Varric's growl rolled through the floor. Rhaedan continued. You will name every tomb, every ledger, every false funeral, every child sealed before succession, every Luna used as carrier, every noble house that bought a wolf shadow, and every king who signed with you. Selvarra smiled faintly. And when your name appears? The chapel went quiet. Isla looked at Rhaedan. Selvarra saw the wound she had aimed for and pressed deeper. You rejected her. You spoke the words. You gave the court permission to strip her. You stood above her while they called her poison. Perhaps I lit the pyre, Majesty, but you gave it royal air. Rhaedan did not defend himself. That was the first thing Isla noticed. He did not reach for grief. He did not say he had been deceived. He did not hide behind Varric's burial or temple lies. He looked at Isla. My name stands too, he said. The funeral torch burned brighter. Witness accepted. The words hurt more than apology would have, because apology asked her to feel. Witness asked him to answer. Rhaedan removed the black royal cloak from his shoulders and laid it beside the broken crown. I rejected Isla Vale before witness, he said, voice carrying up through the chapel, through the cracked roof, through the bells above. I believed the temple because belief cost me less than doubt. I let the court punish the woman my wolf had chosen. Until every false funeral is named, my rejection stands accused beside the law that shaped it. Outside, the palace square fell silent. Not fully, but enough. Isla's throat tightened. Selvara's expression hardened. She had wanted his guilt to divide him from Isla. Instead, he had placed it where everyone could see it. The first wolf stepped toward Rhaedan. Do you refuse ownership over the bond you wounded? Rhaedan's eyes moved to the faded mate scar beneath Isla's collarbone. For one breath, the old pain rose between them. The night of rejection, the silence after, the way his voice had become a blade because others taught him where to aim it. Then he lowered his head. I refuse ownership, he said. If the bond lives, it lives by her choice as much as mine. If she refuses me, the refusal stands. The grave white torch flared so sharply Isla nearly dropped it. The faded scar beneath her collarbone burned. Not closed, not healed. Awake. Varric moved closer to her, and for the first time since rising from the tomb, he did not press pain into her. He pressed warmth. A wolf's apology was not human. It did not speak in speeches. It placed its throat near the hand of the one it had wronged by obeying too late. Isla touched his scarred muzzle. I heard you, she whispered. Varric closed his eyes. Above them, the city bells changed rhythm. 3 sharp strikes. A warning. The captain returned again, face pale. Majesty. The noble houses are gathering armed men in the West Square. Lord Caro claims the dead wolves are false spirits and demands the rejected Luna be surrendered for cleansing. House Nereth has sealed its gates. House Vale is burning old funeral ledgers. Illyra's spirit snarled. Isla's blood went cold. House Vale. Her house. Rhaedan reached for his sword. Isla lifted the torch before he could speak. Not war, she said. They are burning records, he said. Then we bring the witnesses before the fire reaches them. Selvara smiled from the floor. House Vale will never open to you. They raised you low enough to be useful and ashamed enough to be quiet. Do you think they will let their dead cousin walk home through the gate? Illyra's silver-gray spirit pressed against Isla's side. The torch flame bent west. Isla looked at Rhaedan. House Vale first. His face tightened. They may try to kill you. They already tried to bury what I am. The first wolf stepped behind her. Varric moved to her other side. Kieran and the 73 spirits gathered along the chapel path. The witness flames in their chests burned brighter, ready to follow. Rhaedan turned to the guards. No one rides ahead to warn them. No one strikes unless struck first. Selvara and Neressa come under witness. Neressa looked up sharply. Me? Isla's voice was cold. Illyra was worn through you. You will stand before the house that stole her. Neressa bowed her head. Yes. The witness procession left the palace chapel beneath a silent moon. Isla walked first, still barefoot, still in the torn mourning dress they had given her as humiliation. But now the funeral torch burned like a law older than shame. Behind her walked the wolves that had been buried. Behind them walked the crownless king who had placed his guilt under witness. The city opened around them. People came to doors. Children hid behind mothers. Old men wept when wolf spirits paused before their houses. Servants fell to their knees not in worship, but because some of the wolves looked at them like lost family. No one touched Isla. No one mocked her. Fear walked with them, yes, but so did recognition. By the time they reached House Vale, smoke was already rising from the inner courtyard. The gates were barred. Men with bows stood along the wall. Lord Edric Vale, Isla's uncle and the man who had raised her after her parents died, stood above the gate in a black cloak. His eyes found Isla. No surprise, only calculation. Turn back, he called. Whatever spirit wears Illyra's shape is not welcome here. Illyra's wolf spirit shook with rage. Isla stepped forward until the torchlight touched the gate. You knew, she said. Lord Edric's face did not change. I know many things, child. The word child struck harder than insult. He had used it when she was small. When she cried. When she asked why Illyra's room had been emptied before dawn. When she wondered why the family chapel smelled like smoke. Rhaedan moved beside her, but did not speak. This was her door. Her witness. Isla lifted the torch. Open the gate under witness. Lord Edric smiled thinly. No. The fire inside the courtyard rose higher, ledgers burning, names dying. Alira stepped forward and raised her head. Her voice rang through the West Square. My name is Isla Vale. I refused a bride contract. My wolf was taken from my body and dressed around another woman. My house declared me fever dead. The gates shook. Lord Edric's smile vanished. Inside the courtyard, something answered Alira. A woman's scream. Living. Isla's heart stopped. Alira turned toward the sound. The torch flames split, revealing a hidden cellar beneath House Vale. There were more than records inside. There were women, living women, bound beneath funeral veils. Lord Edric shouted, "Loose arrows!" Bows lifted. Rhaedan stepped in front of Isla. She grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "No," she said. Then she raised the funeral torch toward the walls. Every buried wolf behind her lifted its head. The arrows froze in midair, caught in grave-white fire. Isla looked up at her uncle. The rejected Luna's voice carried through the square. Then witness opens what blood refuses. The gates of House Vale burst inward, and the living funeral seller screamed her name. Not one voice. Many. Women cried from beneath House Vale like the walls themselves had learned pain. The gates lay broken inward, their iron hinges smoking with grave-white fire. Arrows hung frozen above the courtyard, suspended in the torchlight like accusations that had forgotten how to fall. Lord Edric Vale stood on the wall with his face drained of color. For the first time in Isla's life, her uncle looked at her without calculation. He looked afraid. Good. Isla stepped through the broken gate with Alira's spirit at her side. Varric and the first wolf behind her. Rhaedan crownless beside the witness guard. And Salvara and Neressa bound under watch. Smoke rolled across the courtyard from burning ledgers. Servants huddled near the walls. Noblemen lowered their bows slowly as the buried wolves entered after Isla, each carrying a witness flame in its chest. From beneath the central fountain came another scream. Living. Isla turned toward it. The funeral torch bent down. The fountain split open. Beneath it lay a hidden stair descending into a cellar lined with old funeral veils. The smell that rose from below was not death. It was damp stone, fear, old medicine, and bodies kept alive where records could still use them. Rhaedan looked at Lord Edric. His voice was lethal. Open it. Lord Edric said nothing. Alira's spirit snarled. The cellar door opened by itself. Isla descended first. No one stopped her now. Below House Vale, the living funeral cellar stretched farther than the house above. Iron beds lined the walls. Silver burial threads hung from hooks. Ledger shelves had been dragged into the center and set on fire. But the grave-white torch pulled the smoke aside, revealing pages still unburned. Women lay behind moonbone bars. Some were old, some young, some wore torn mourning dresses. Some had faded mate marks. Some had wolf shadows sleeping outside their bodies in glass jars. Some were too weak to sit up. All of them turned when Isla entered. One woman whispered, "Morel?" Isla's chest tightened. "No," she said. "Isla." The woman began to cry. Alira moved to the nearest cage and pressed her spirit body against the bars. A woman inside reached out with shaking hands. "Elida?" The silver-gray wolf lowered her head. The woman sobbed. "They told me you died." Alira's voice moved through the cellar. "They told everyone that." Isla turned toward Lord Edric as guards dragged him down the stairs. "How many?" He lifted his chin. House Vale preserved unstable women who would have been killed elsewhere. The torch flame went black at the center. "Preserved?" Isla said. "They were rejected. Dangerous. Bond. Broken. Some herd buried wolves. Some carried failed Luna fire. Some would have destabilized marriage contracts." Rhaedan stepped forward. "You kept them alive to use their bonds." Lord Edric looked at the king. "Your court bought results from houses like mine for generations. Do not stand in my cellar and pretend your throne did not enjoy clean outcomes." Silence fell. Salvara smiled faintly from behind the guards. The trap was familiar now. Spread the guilt so wide that no one could move. Rhaedan did not deny it. "My throne stands accused," he said. "So does your house." The witness torch flared. "Accepted." Isla walked to the first cage. Inside, A woman with silver hair and fever-bright eyes clutched a dead funeral veil to her chest. "What is your name?" Isla asked. The woman swallowed. "Tamsin Vale. Do you choose to leave?" Tamsin stared as if the question were a language she had forgotten. Then she nodded. The bars opened. One by one, Isla asked. "Not ordered. Not freed by force." Asked. "Tamsin. Rhea. Solen. Marith. Anya. Vala. Saris. Othra. Leora. 26 living women. 12 sleeping wolf shadows in jars. 7 burned ledgers saved from the fire. 3 noble seals. 1 royal payment mark." Rhaedan saw the mark. His father's. Then another. His own. He went still. Lord Edric smiled. "Their Majesty. Your seal. The order that removed Isla from Luna, protection after the rejection. Your name opened our right to hold her, if she showed grave moon symptoms." Isla stared at the page. The cellar seemed to tilt. Rhaedan took the ledger, read it, and the last color left his face. "I did not know this clause existed." Lord Edric's voice was smooth. "Few men read what grief signs for them." The words struck deep. Isla remembered the day after the rejection. Guards taking her veil, her rooms, her name in the palace. She remembered being returned to House Vale like damaged property. She remembered her uncle telling her she should be grateful he let her sleep above ground. Rhaedan looked at her. No apology came first. "Good." He placed the ledger on the witness floor. "My seal stands under witness," he said. "The order is void. The harm remains mine to answer for." The torch accepted it. Isla did not forgive him, but something bitter in her stopped bleeding unseen. Above them, the west square filled with people. News of the cellar spread faster than fire. Families came running. Some found names, some found bones, some found women still alive. House Vale's men dropped their weapons when their own buried relatives began calling from behind the bars. Selvarra watched the cellar open, and for the first time, no argument came, because the living were harder to dismiss than ghosts. By moonset, House Vale had fallen without a battle, not to Rhaedan's sword, to its own cellar. Lord Edric was bound in plain iron. Nerissa named 3 priests who dressed Alira's wolf shadow around her. Selvarra was forced to identify the temple seals on the jars. Scribes recorded until their hands cramped. The women were carried into the courtyard under blankets, and each was asked where she wanted to go before any family was allowed near her. When dawn began to pale the sky, Isla returned to the broken gate. The funeral torch still burned, but quieter now. The first wolf stood at the edge of the square, watching the road beyond the city. Varric stayed beside Rhaedan. Alira remained with the freed Vale women. Kieran slept at the feet of an old nurse who had once hidden royal children from temple collectors. Rhaedan came to stand several steps from Isla. "May I speak?" he asked. The question moved through her more gently than she wanted. "Yes." His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "The council will demand a new Luna before the next full moon. I know. They will say the kingdom needs a restored bond. I know. They will say your torch proves you belong beside the throne." Isla looked at him then. Rhaedan did not reach for her. He stood crownless in the ash of House Vale, with his own guilt recorded behind him and his restored wolf silent at his side. "And what will you say?" she asked. His answer came without hesitation. "That the torch answered you, not me. That Varric followed you, not my crown. That no bond I wounded can be used to repair my throne before you choose whether it deserves to live." The mate scar beneath Isla's collarbone warmed. Not healed, not claimed. Awake. She looked away toward the city, where old moon chapel bells still rang in the distance. "I will not be Luna to a court that needs my pain to cleanse itself," she said. Rhaedan bowed his head. "Then you will not be asked." "Not yet," she added. He looked up. The words surprised both of them. Isla tightened her grip on the torch. "I will lead the witness roads until every false funeral is opened, every sealed wolf named, every living cellar emptied, every rejected woman asked what she chooses. After that, if the bond still lives..." She stopped. Rhaedan waited. He had learned that waiting was sometimes the only honest thing power could do. "If the bond still lives," Isla said, You may ask me again. Not before the court. Not before the crown. Not before Varric. Me. Rhaedan's face changed. Not joy. Not victory. Something quieter. Devotion learning restraint. Then my crown waits, he said. Varric lowered his head beside him. So do I. Isla looked at the wolf spirit that had risen from its grave and followed her when no one else believed her. This time, tears did come. Only once. Only briefly. Then she wiped them away and turned toward the road. Behind her, the people of Veyrhold watched the rejected Luna stand barefoot in a torn mourning dress with the funeral torch burning in her hand. Around her stood the wolves who had been buried and the women who had been hidden. Behind them stood the crownless king, the broken priestess, the false queen, the opened house, and the first wolf that had refused a crown. Isla had been forced to carry the torch as punishment. She carried it out of House Vale as law. By sunrise, every old moon chapel in Veyrhold had opened its doors. By the next moon, no funeral could be sealed without witness. And when Isla Vale Ashvale walked the royal tomb road again, no one called her failed Luna. They called her Torchbearer. Not because she belonged to the king, because the dead wolves had followed her home.